We're here, of course, to confer this award on an extraordinary individual who over the last number of years has been creating a canvas of images that they give us an amazing image of this fascinating, iconic city, which shows us the depth of culture and individuals who inhabit New York City, and has captured the imaginations of millions across the world. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you tonight, Mr. Brandon Stanton.
Hey everybody. So am I mic'd up or am I just talking loud? I can do either. Okay, everybody can hear me, right? This is a cool room. Yeah. It reminds me, one of my favorite classes was English history. And yeah, it just kind of reminds me of those parliaments where everybody's just kind of shouting at you. Like, how dare you, you valley licker? I don't know. I was telling everybody, we had a little reception in the back room before I walked in, and I was like, this is my first time to Dublin, I'm embarrassed to say, to Ireland. And I was laughing. It's just like, yeah, you kind of always hear, stereotypes and kind of caricatures of people from different countries. I'm sure you guys have heard New Yorkers are rude or whatever, and they're very aggressive, and so you always try to kind of put those out of your mind and say, oh, everybody's the same. Then I flew in last night at 4:30, and I swear my taxi ride home, the guy was like, oh, fuck this, fuck that, fuck this, and then he go, oh, that's a nice pub right there, fuck this, that's a great place to get a Guinness, and I just oh my gosh, this is hilarious. So, yeah, so that was my ride home. So he said I could speak for as long as I wanted. So I've had a kind of very mixed success with public speaking. I feel like I'm kind of getting better. But yeah, recently I was on stage in Rochester, New York, and there were 1,000 people there. And they were paying me. I'm getting an award today, a little less pressure, because you guys, I don't have to, fulfill a contractual obligation to do a good job. But, yeah, right? So it'll actually probably mean it's going to be better because there's less pressure. But I was on stage, and these people had flown me out there, and they paid. And I'd given a few speeches at that point, so I thought I was confident. I thought I'd gotten pretty good at it. But then I just walked out, and there were all these people, and I kind of started talking. And you guys, this is, the nightmare situation that people just can dread. I could kind of hear my voice kind of start to shake, and I'm like, oh God, I'm getting nervous. Everybody's looking at me. And then when you start thinking about being nervous, you can't think about what you're going to say. You know what I mean? It's just every little thought that goes into you being nervous is taken away from giving a speech. And so it's this awful downward spiral. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm shaking. And all of a sudden, my voice was slowing down. And then just 2 minutes into the speech of 1,000 people, I just froze on stage. And I just said, oh my God, I'm so nervous. And it was they started clapping for me like I was a 3-year-old at a talent show. They were just you can do it. Yeah, you can do it. Oh, it was absolutely horrible. So if I freeze up, you guys can just start doing that, and maybe I'll recover. But what I think it is about Humans of New York that is so special, and what it is that I think people can learn from it, and why it makes it such an interesting subject, is that I think that 10 years ago it couldn't even have been possible. It's just I'm a dude who's been photographing for 4 years. 4 years. Possibly, Humans of New York, I don't know, because 15 years ago, they didn't take that detailed of records, but arguably on its way to being the best-selling photography book of all time. And I've been photographing for 4 years. You know how crazy that is? And what that is a demonstration of how much society has changed because of the interconnectivity and because of the social media. Whereas now, somebody with a good idea, and a willingness to work very hard can build something this massive in such a short amount of time because of how much information flows, how fast ideas flow. Think about what would have had to happen 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if I had the idea for Humans of New York and I moved to New York like I did with nothing, just this idea. I would have had to have worked as an assistant, then an apprentice, started to go to cocktail parties, take all these very artistic photos. I don't even think they would have ever signed off on Humans of New York because it's not, sexy or raw or controversial or provocative enough. Then I would have had to go to these cocktail parties, started rubbing shoulders with the editor of New York Magazine. Oh, this is this art critic. If he likes your stuff, you can get big. I would have been completely reliant on these gatekeepers, these tastemakers, to basically anoint me, to choose me, and say, you're good enough for us to present to a large audience. You're good enough because I validate you, then you're going to have a chance now to get an audience because I'm going to write an article about you, or I'm going to do this. And so it was very restrictive and it was very clubby. And so basically, what all these tools that have come out now have just allowed you to basically go straight to your audience. And basically, you can build your own audience and distribute yourself without having to get I'm sure people at the New York Times still, a lot of them still think I'm a shitty photographer. I don't know, I'm certainly, not winning any awards, but, Humans of New York is not about photography. It's new. It's very new. It's about, some photography, but it's about these interviews. It's about this intimacy with strangers. That's what I think it's the most thing about. It's about intimacy with strangers. And so it doesn't really fit into a category. And so that's when I was talking with these people, the people in the reception, that the reason social media is so amazing, even as a step over Google, is that it helps people find what they don't know they're looking for. They don't know they're looking for it. Like, for example, nobody goes to Google, not having heard of Humans of New York, and types in, guy walking around photographing people in New York and asking them questions about their dead relatives. You know what I mean? And it's just like, so what this social media has done is it allows people to find things that they don't know they're looking for. And I can see it on the street. Every time somebody comes up to me that's a fan of Humans of New York, I always ask, how'd you find it? It's always my cousin shared it, or my mom liked it, or my brother commented on one of your photos and I saw it. And so Humans of New York kind of spread through these channels and reached a lot of people who did not know they were looking for it. And that's something that's only recently been made available and even possible in the last 5 years. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword, though, because we have a society now where people can get their idea faster out there than ever before. People can generate an audience easier and faster than ever before. So what happens? Everybody's trying to do it. Everybody wants you to listen to their song. Just imagine when you log onto Facebook or Instagram, got this feed coming down. Everybody in here, say we're the world. Everybody in here is battling for each other's attention. Attention is a very limited resource, but everybody's got something that they want you to pay attention to. Listen to my song, read my short story, look at my latest blog post. And so you've got this noise where everybody is battling for everybody else's attention, and it's very hard to stick your head out above the crowd and start actually building kind of a firm foundation because there's so much noise. And, I think Humans of New York managed to succeed in a very accidental way because I was a bond trader. I was working in finance, and I lost my job. And so when I started Humans of New York, I didn't know much about blogging. I didn't really know what a blog was. I didn't know much about using social media to generate an audience. So when I started Humans of New York, I started it with the idea that I was going to take 10,000 portraits. It was like this big, chaotic goal. I was going to take 10,000 portraits and I was going to plot them on a map in New York City. The interviews, The interviews weren't even a part of it at that time. That's why I moved to New York City. All my friends thought I was crazy. My family thought I was crazy. I had zero photography experience. And I'm going to be a full-time photographer. I got this great idea. I'm just shoving my camera in people's faces and hit and click, and it's going to be big. And so, I moved to New York and I started doing this, and I was focusing not on how many followers I had, and that's how everybody starts the day, and that's where they fall down. Is that they immediately want these followers. Their mind is, I'm going to create something and have 10,000. I want 10,000 Facebook fans or 10,000 Twitter followers. And instead, because I didn't really know about how social media worked, my stupid looking back idea was, I am going to take 10,000 portraits. I'm going to complete this, and then I'm going to take this around to newspapers and get press about it. I'm going to present it as a completed thing. When in reality, the secret formula is letting out a little bit of content every single day and having an audience, gather up around that. I didn't know that at the time. And my goal was, I'm going to take 10,000 portraits, I'm going to complete it, and then I'm going to present it to people. And so what happened is, by the time I started figuring out about social media, I had already taken thousands of portraits. So when I started competing for other people's attention, not only the attention of people, but the attention of press too. You got to imagine, the people that work as journalists are just like me and you, logging into our Facebook news feed and having everybody trying to get our attention. They're the same way. They're just getting, in their form, it's just emails. Look at my idea, look at my project, look what I'm doing. Except here you had a guy, when everybody else was saying, look at this idea I have, or these 3 or 4 pictures I've taken, or these 3 or 4 songs I wrote. By the time I figured it out, I'm like, I've been walking around the streets of New York City for a year and a half. I've taken thousands of portraits. Thousands of portraits. And so my focus was always on the work. And by focusing on the work, this huge audience kind of evolved up around it, because I was somebody who really was not focusing on the promotion, but just producing. And in a world now where everybody is focusing on the promotion, that really stands out, to have somebody who's focusing on nothing but their work, because that's what's rare today. Everybody wants to be compensated for an idea because of how this society has emerged, and there's all these examples. New York is full of it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this firsthand from friends, acquaintances. They call themselves artists. I'm a musician. I'm a photographer. I'm a writer. And basically what that means is writing 2 or 3 pieces and doing everything you can to promote it on social media. Or making 2 or 3 songs and doing everything you can to promote it on social media. That's become the new definition of what it means to be an artist. And then just drink all night and sleep all day. Right? And it's that is the problem. And that's why they're not, having that success. Whereas if you gotta keep what you're doing in the metric of success anchored in the work. And that's the only way to kind of move forward in this world of so much noise, is that if you're a writer, you can't focus. The only thing you can control is how hard you work. The only thing you can control is how hard you work. You can't control how many people are paying attention, how many likes you have, how many shares you have. The only thing that is within your control is how many portraits you take. How many portraits you take. And that's the only thing that was in your control. And so by focusing on that, by saying, I'm going to do this every single day, I'm not going to focus on how many people, I'm just going to make sure that every single day I take 5 or 6 portraits. Every single day. For 4.5 years I've done that. If you average out, closer to 4 years, if you average out the posts on Humans of New York, take 4, multiply it by 365, take the amount of portraits I've taken and divide it by that number, it's going to be over 6. Every single day, 6 portraits, because that's what I was focusing on. And what do you know? This giant audience rose up around me because they knew they could depend on me. They knew there was a guy that's every single day he was out there working, and he was doing work and doing work and doing work. And if every time they went, there was going to be new content. Every time he's out there finding new stuff. He's not just trying to promote himself. So I just focused on the work, and I told myself the moment I knew Humans of New York was going to be huge. After it started growing, it just started, the growth rate just started jumping. We're putting on 15 Facebook fans a day, now 150, now 25,000 a day. And I could kind of start to see, and the emails start to come in. Brandon, come speak here. Brandon, come. Brandon, come speak here. Brandon, come collaborate. Write in our magazine. And the offers get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, bigger and bigger and bigger. Hey, we are, I'm gonna make it up. Vogue magazine will pay you this much to go to Paris for a week and photograph for us. And it's just like, oh, that's so prestigious. That'll make me look good. That'll bring a lot of attention. But that's not what got me here. Brandon, here's $30,000. Come to this conference for 4 days and speak. But that's not what got me here. Very early on, I knew that what was getting me here was focusing on the work, and I told myself, no matter how big this gets, the one thing I'm going to focus on is going out there and photographing every day. No matter how big it gets, no matter 100 new emails a day with all this stuff, that's not important. What's important is working on the photography every single day. And so that's been the foundation that I've based it on. And for 4 years, every single day, I've gone out there and I've taken 6 photos. And so, if you guys have something you're trying to make big, whether it be a business or anything, don't spend the time trying to sell people on your idea. Ideas are cheaper than they've ever been. When somebody tells me they have an idea that's so good that they can't tell me, I laugh. It's like, oh, good luck with that. It's like, seriously, it's like people are so worried about their ideas getting stolen. Like, one good exercise, I read this in a book, it's like, okay, if you're a businessman and you have an idea that you think is so good that you're afraid of getting stolen, I dare you to try to call your competitors and get them to take your idea. Try it. No, they're too busy doing their own stuff. They're too busy with their ideas. So ideas are cheaper than they've ever been. So if you want to stand out in a world where everybody just wants to share their ideas and get credit for their ideas, be the person who focuses on the work. That's I think that's kind of a good little place to frame it, and I will take questions from anybody who wants to ask. Actually, do you guys want to see how I approach somebody on the street and ask them these questions? It's always, okay. Can I have a volunteer? All right, come on down. What's your name?
Allie.
Allie, give me a hug. It's so good to see you. Okay. Okay. So here, you can just actually sit right there, and I'll pretend like you're just relaxing. Yeah. So, like I said, I've only been photographing for 4 years, and there's no way I'm the best photographer in the world. No way I'm the best journalist in the world. But I have approached over 10,000 people on the streets of what is stereotypically, and by reputation, one of the colder cities in the world, and have asked them, for their photograph. So I'm thinking by about this time, I might be just about the best at the world at stopping random people on the street and getting them to let me take their photograph. And then kind of, what it is about Humans of New York, and I say it's not the photography, what it is that if you want to use business terms, I'm sure some of you study business, that's the competitive advantage of Humans of New York. Why is it growing so fast? Why is it so difficult to duplicate? It's the taking a atmosphere of kind of fear and strangeness and uncomfortableness and turning that into an atmosphere of intimacy where people feel comfortable to disclose in a very short amount of time. And, the way that I figured this out is just by doing it 10,000 times and just getting beaten down. Just through, getting yelled at, making people very nervous, getting uncomfortable. And so I just, Allie's your name?
Ellen, sorry.
Ellen, no, that's okay. And I'm sure you told it to me right. Probably my fault. And so, just over approaching like 10,000 people, I've just kind of learned kind of naturally, and it applies to a lot of different areas. It's just how to make people comfortable when you're first meeting them. And this applies at parties or anything. And, when I was first starting Humans of New York, what I was always experimenting with is what is the correct words to say, right? I thought it was like, what words can I say that are going to allow me to get this person to take my photograph? And I remember I experimented with everything. I had my little speech. I was constantly tinkering with it. Just to give you an example of how much attention I was paying to it, I spent so long trying to figure out whether it'd be more effective to use the word portrait or photograph. Just something little like that. Can I take your portrait or can I take your photograph? Just like, what's it going to be that allows these people to feel comfortable enough to let me take their picture? And then after just repeated and repeated and repeated attempts, I realized it had nothing to do with what the words I was saying. And it's all about the energy that you're giving off. It's just 100% energy. And it's very hard to teach because the worst energy you can give off is nervousness. And it's almost impossible to not be nervous if you haven't approached people 10,000 times, you know what I mean? And so it almost just had to be earned through just like beating it into, because when you walk up to somebody and you're kind of nervous and you're shifting and you're kind of not looking them straight in the eye, it's like they have this subconscious reaction. Why is he nervous? What's going on? What's going on? And so it's just like, basically, what you're doing on the street, it's people are just making these kind of subconscious, especially in New York, where like in New York, if somebody comes up to you and they talk to you, even if they have this big smile on your face, it's gonna be like, hey, how are you? Blah, 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 blah. Just need your credit card number right here. You know what I mean? It's like, it's always coming around to something. So it's a very hard stigma to overcome. And so, the way I do it is just by being as calm and non-threatening as possible. And it actually kind of makes me wince when I see it on video because I already kind of have a bit of a high voice, but when I make an approach, I sound like a woman. And I just and so what I'll do is, the first thing I'll do is I'll never approach from behind. So, and I'm serious, it's rule number one. If the first reaction of somebody to you is this, you're screwed. It's like, you could be Mother Teresa, and they're not going to want to talk to you. So if Ellen was, facing this way, okay, so what I would do, and she's kind of sitting down, but even if she was walking down that way, I'd cross the street, and I'd kind of, and then I'll make the long turn, and then I'll come. And then I always I always crouch. And this isn't even something that I made the conscious decision to do. This is just stuff that was conditioned into me from so long. And I go, excuse me, is there any way I can take your photograph?
Yes.
Okay. And so she said yes. And so, it's funny because now it's been a best-selling book. It's pretty well known in New York, obviously. But still, almost like it's a tribute and a testament to my roots when I was just a guy walking around with a camera and idea. I always just start out with, do you mind if I take your photo? And sometimes that's enough to say yes. If they start to hesitate, you can kind of feel the no coming. There's a lot of ways to feel the no coming. If they never actually stop moving, that's very hard to turn into a yes. And so, you can feel the no coming from the kind of the facial expressions. So if I feel the no coming, then I come out with the phone. It's a best-selling book. Here it is. Blah 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 blah. And so then that'll happen. And so if they say yes, notice I never tell them about the interview at first. But it's important. It's you don't want to just drop it on them. You know what I mean? Can I take your photo and ask you about your mom's cancer or anything like that? You just because the conversations get very intimate very fast. And you just want to kind of have it be escalating slowly. So Ellen said yes. So I will always take a full body shot first, the less intimate. And so, pow. And then what I'll do is I'll sit down and I always, And so, but that's one thing I'll always try to do. It's like if you see pictures of me on Instagram or whatever, like so many times I'm laying on the ground, especially because I'm 6'4", like, and I just like the goal is to just be as non-threatening as possible. So like I'll normally just kind of like sit down at somebody's feet, like this, and okay, so Ellen. This is a lot different than I normally do because
yeah, me too.
Obviously. Oh man, I love Ellen. So the reason that it's difficult, obviously, is that normally when I'm having this conversation, it would just be like me and you, like by a fire escape. You might have been smoking a cigarette or something, and there's not a bunch of people watching, so it's obviously it's a lot easier. And I will tell you guys, like one thing that I always look for is people standing alone, because it's very paradoxical that even when people have heard of Humans of New York, even when they know it's going to be shared in front of like 6 million people later that night, if their friends near them, they'll clam up. Isn't that interesting? If there's like somebody actually there that they know, they'll clam up. And so, obviously, this is a very, different environment than I normally ask questions in, and they're very hard questions also. So if you can't think of an answer, don't worry about it. Sometimes I ask people 8 questions, they can't think of an answer to any of them. So if there's any question you can't think of an answer to, it's not a big deal at all. But one question that I often ask is, what is your greatest struggle right now?
My best friend is moving to Holland next Wednesday.
Okay.
So I'm trying to cope with that while getting ready for my exams.
Okay. So how long have you known this person?
Since Christmas. So.
That was quick. I'd probably go with that. That's wow. Yeah, that's great. Normally, if something really makes me laugh, it automatically goes on the blog. That is funny, Chris. Okay, well, good. You're off the hook. You said something awesome. So now I can just kind of, without Ellen being under the pressure to say something that profound or funny, I can kind of explain my thought process of why I'm going through the interview, what I'm doing when I'm going through the interviews. And as you guys have noticed, that the entire kind of path up to this point has been escalating levels of intimacy. Oh, can I take your photo? Do you mind it? And then I take the portrait, and then I come up. I skipped a few steps. What I say, since you guys already know, I had skipped it, but what I do is I go, well, what I actually do is I've taken over 5,000 pictures of people around New York City, and I find out a little bit about everyone I photograph, and I might photograph you while you're talking or while you're thinking, and then I move into one thing that I often ask, and I always start with like these very, very broad questions, as you guys have probably noticed, and I'm never really looking for those answers necessarily, but I'm looking for starting points to kind of get into a conversation. A lot of times I'll ask a very broad question like, what's your greatest struggle right now? Or give one piece of advice. And a lot of times the answer is almost always very broad. Like for example, give one piece of advice, be optimistic, okay? And so what I'm always looking for is something that person has told me that nobody else has told me. I don't want it to be, and that's normally not an opinion, and it's normally not a philosophy. It's almost always a story. Because we all share similar philosophies, we all share similar opinions on a lot of different issues, but all of our stories are our own. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to like peel off the layers of answers to get from these very broad philosophical statements to a story that I've never heard before, because it's that person. So if they say, give me one piece of advice, be optimistic. Tell me about a time that you had trouble being optimistic, or take more risks. Tell me about a time when you didn't take a risk, that you really regretted it. Forgive people. Who in your life have you had the hardest time forgiving? You know? What's your greatest struggle right now? Getting over depression. Tell me about the time in your life that you felt the most depressed. You know? It's always, it's always about trying to take things from the very broad, because there's like a safety. There's a safety to answering very generally, with these kind of one-word cookie-cutter answers. It's protecting. It's like a layer of protection. You don't really reveal anything about yourself by saying, seize the day. But when you're asked to tell about a time that you didn't seize the day, then you're kind of forced to reveal about yourself. And so it's always a effort of taking the very broad and turning it into the very personal. And that's really, what I'm trying to do. Sometimes it's the first thing out of their mouth, her best friend she met at Christmas. That's very Ellen. Could not be more Ellen than that. And sometimes it takes about 10 or 15 minutes. But if the person has, the way I determine whether somebody's going to go on the blog or not, it's really just like open or closed energy. Sometimes you're just asking the question, the person's giving these clipped answers, you can tell it's not going anywhere. They've chosen not to disclose, which is perfectly fine. There's a weird dude asking them questions. But if somebody's sitting there and trying to think of the answers and taking time, I will sit there with them as long as possible, 15, 20 minutes. Because I know that eventually we're gonna find out something. And I like to ask about the emotions too, as you guys have probably seen. Saddest moment, happiest moment, moment you felt most afraid, moment you felt most let down. Because if you guys will think about like the pivotal moments in your life, more often than not, there was an extremely strong emotion attached to those moments. And so like if you really want to get at like the stories that really kind of formed a person, a good place to start is to circle around these emotions and try to find out what the stories were associated with these very strong feelings. And so that's what I'm doing with my interview process. One more hug, Ellen. Thanks.
So I think what I'll do is I'll ask a couple of questions and I'll leave the rest of the floor then to give your questions. So I think the first thing I'd like to ask is there something unique about New York that allows it to have such a diverse range of people, or are those people as ordinary as any other people, you just manage to get those stories, or is there something unique about New York City?
I'm about to choke. Yes and no. It's impossible to deny that New York is extremely diverse. I mean, you just look at the map. It's like chopped up into like 14 different neighborhoods. Each one's got its own flavor, its own type of people. That's just Manhattan, too. You go out into Brooklyn, it's a whole new world. I mean, it's the first stop for most people moving to America, And a lot of people don't leave once they get there. So you just naturally have so many different types of ethnicities, a lot of different incomes, and every time you go up and down the income ladder, stories change. Every time you go across the spectrum of ethnicities, stories change. So it does have, a large, diverse amount of people, but the longer that Humans in New York goes on, the more I pride myself on just picking the most ordinary person there is. It's evolved a lot. It's even evolved past the first book a lot. The first book's very visual, very colorful, very eccentric, very loud. There's a lot of personalities. Where if you follow the blog recently, it's just like I just find normal, just everyday people just sitting around and try to draw these deep stories out of them. So yes, New York is a very special place, but is that currently what gives the blog a power? I don't think so. I just think it's kind of the power in these individual stories, yeah.
Okay. Another question then is what provided the impetus to go to Iran and take pictures there?
Well, part of it, honestly, 23 at the time, you always kind of want to, spread your wings, do things that make you uncomfortable. Iran, especially in American media, was some place that was really kind of being demonized at the time. And one of the emails that I keep getting, one of the recurrent kind of fan letters that I get is that oh, you really humanize New York. you know, and or like my mom was terrified of me going to New York, but now she sees your blog and she realizes it's not that scary. And so I thought to myself, you know, if this art has a humanizing effect, let's go somewhere that's feared and just see what happens. And I mean, it was a very non-political trip, you know, and I'm very, very careful to never use the blog to advocate anything. So, you know, I went to Iran. I didn't ask people, what's your opinion of America? You know, do you love America? Do you love the West? Like, I didn't ask. I just like Honey at home. Just, you know, what was the saddest moment of your life? Just things like that. So I went to a place that was misunderstood, but kept it in the range of, you know, ordinary as possible. I wasn't trying to be flowery. I was just trying to show, you know, the normalcy. And the same thing, you know, with Boston. I went to Boston after the marathon bombings last year. Media from all over the country was in Boston. I'm the only dude that spent a week there and didn't ask a single person about the bombings. You know? I was just doing my thing in a place that all the other media coming out of it. And that's where I gave a talk at Columbia, where media is driven by stories. And it's like they're in the business of stories. What makes you buy the newspaper? What makes you give them money that keeps them in business? The power of the stories they're telling. And because of that economic incentive, media naturally gravitates towards drama, the most dramatic stories. You know, for example, if the media is descending upon an area that has been ravaged by a hurricane, okay, 90% of the houses can be perfect. 100% of the press is gathered around the most destroyed house. And that's the image they're sending out. Same thing at a protest. If you've got 999 peaceful protesters and then one crazy guy that's just going nuts, 100% of the media is taking a photo of that guy to tell the most dramatic story. So that naturally skews our opinions of things. You know, it's just like if you went to Boston at the marathon bomb, looking at the news coming out of there, or looking at the news coming out of Iran. Iran's all fanatics that want death to America. Boston's nothing but weeping people. When in reality, 99.99% of what was going on there at both those times where life is normal, you know? And so that's what I try to do when I go somewhere. Is I don't try to show an optimistic side to the negative or a negative side to the positive. I just try to show normalcy. Yeah.
And then when did you have the brilliant inspiration to attach stories to pictures as opposed to just pictures?
That was the big evolution that really kind of took Humans of New York into the stratosphere. I was, for the longest time, I was just doing photography, thousands of portraits. And I remember one day I took this picture of this woman and she was dressed all in green. And it wasn't that great of a photo. It was okay, but I didn't think it was that good of a photo. And so I didn't really want to share it because I just didn't think I viewed myself at that time as a photographer. And that's what I was. That's what I was trying to be, at least. And so I didn't think that was a good enough photo. But then I got the flu a couple days later and I couldn't go out and photograph. And I wanted to keep the blog going. And so I was like, well, I've got this woman. And she said something to me. She said, I used to be a different color every single day, but one day I was green, and that was a great day. So I've been green for 15 years. Yeah, right? And she said that, and I was like, oh, well, I'll just put that on the top of the photo. And all of a sudden, it was the most popular photo I've ever had. And I was like, oh, man, there's something to this. And, and from that moment, the path of Humans of New York, and I can't emphasize this enough, and this is, I always say this too, I haven't said this yet, but this is one of the things that I tell everybody. In a world where everybody's competing for everyone else's attention, it's more important to be different than to be good. And if you find something you're doing that's different, then put all your resources into that, or as many resources as possible, because then that's going to allow people to identify you and talk about you. Because suddenly I went from being one of the many guys who's going around taking pictures of people in New York to the guy who was stopping people and finding out about their lives. And once I found that, all my effort since then has been extending that difference, getting more and more intimate. What is it that I do better than anybody else? Not photograph, not be a journalist, not find intimacy with strangers. So ever since that moment, it's been a path of extending that intimacy, telling these stories in better and deeper ways, making people more and more comfortable. And it's kind of exciting because if that's what Humans of New York is, telling intimate stories of strangers, there's so much room to evolve around that core competency. Different mediums, all kinds of stuff. And so that's what's really exciting to me, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think I'll open the questions to the floor. Anyone wants to raise their hand if you have one? Sorry. Liz.
I just wondered, the photos that we don't see, are you archiving them or can we expect to see others at some point?
Good question. There are, I'd say about 25% of the photos of people that I take I don't use, and I don't really if they don't make the cut to go on the blog, I kind of stopped thinking about them, honestly, because it's just like there's such an influx of new material. And like I said, when somebody doesn't make the cut, it rarely has, the main determinant was their willingness to disclose. Was their willingness to disclose. A lot of times, as you guys can see, the process is escalating. So sometimes people let me take the photo, then get into the interview, and then that's when they've reached their point of maximum comfort and they don't want to really participate anymore. Those I can't really use. So the people who, I can't really interview or get much out of, those are the ones that kind of don't make the blog. I've got another adult book coming out next year. I think there's going to be, 100, 150 new photos. But, other than that, I just I take pride in just giving everything away. I mean, if I even fought my first publisher on having to put anything exclusive in the book, everything, all the success of Humans of New York has been thankful for me not focusing on money, but focusing on audience. It's just like at any point, no matter how much money I'm offered, I ask myself one question: is this going to slow the growth of my audience? And if that answer is no, like, hey Brandon, we'll give you $50,000 to hashtag this movie campaign we're doing. It's like, okay, that's money, but how is my audience going to respond? If the answer is ever negative, then I stop doing it. And the way to grow my audience as much as possible is to take as many photos as possible and give them away for free. So that's really kind of the focus of my attention. It's just giving it away, yeah.
Cool. You there?
Hi there. Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor. I was wondering, how has your experience as a photographer changed since people now know your name and your face? And instead of having to approach people, do you have people approaching you? And do you have any funny stories?
It happens a lot. I kind of made it public on the blog a while ago that you can't ask to have your photo taken. That kind of, the whole thing about Humans of New York is portraying people in kind of like an honest moment. Because social media, one of the reasons that so many of my friends and my family had a hard time believing that anything was going to come with Humans of New York is that social media is full of pictures of people. Oh, you're going to take pictures of people and put them on Facebook. That's a great idea. You know what I mean? That's nothing but pictures of people. But, what it is it's pictures of people that weren't looking to be photographed. That's the power of it. Because it's not stage managed. It's not, look at me at the rainforest, look at me holding all these African babies in Ghana. Look, I know there's somebody in here with that profile picture right now. And so it's like, when people come up wanting to be on the blog, it kind of brings that energy into it, because the moment anything smacks of being like stage managed, that's when I run away from it. Because remember, the first question's always like, oh, be optimistic, seize the day. That's a very stage managed response. And so, I always say that, you can't approach me and photograph me. Now, I do have happen more and more and more. The people know the blog when I interview them. Sometimes it hinders the process, and other times it doesn't. And when it does, it's just like I can tell the people cannot get in the moment with me. They can't have a conversation with me. Like everything is running through the filter of imagining it on the blog that night, and just nothing feels authentic, nothing feels real, nothing feels off the cuff. And then I kind of start to move, wrap it up and say, that's if about half the photos go on the blog. If yours don't show up, you can send me an email. I'll send it to you. That's not a good thing to hear if you want to be on the blog. And it's just. But with that being said, I have approached people that have ended up being the biggest fans of the blog in the world, and then when I start talking to them, it just becomes me and them having a conversation. And that's when I really start to get to the gold, where suddenly it starts out as a guy with a camera conducting an interview, and then after about 2 minutes, it's just two people kind of having a natural conversation. Like, really? She said that to you? Like, it's not like, checking questions off the list. It's me like, wait a second, back up, this happened? But what about this guy? You said, and it's just like me talking with people. And that's sometimes very hard to slip into when people are big fans of the blog. Yeah.
Okay, maybe one from the back? In the pink?
How's your approach and experience different with little kids?
Good question. It's very different. I surprisingly, everybody's like, how do you get pictures of little kids? How do you get pictures of little kids? I actually, a lot of adult photographers, because they just they feel like a creep if they photograph a little kid. And so they honestly, that's one of the main questions I get. It's like, how the heck do you do it? And I actually have better success getting pictures of little kids than adults, because I found that parents will throw their kids in front of a camera, even if they're afraid. But the way I do it is I will walk up and I will not even acknowledge the child. I won't make eye contact. I won't talk to them or anything. I'll just walk up and it's an exchange between two adults. And I won't even look at that. I say, is there any way I can photograph your daughter? I run a very popular website. And then I go straight into the explanation with the kids. Yeah. You got nothing to gain from just being dude with camera when you're asking to photograph a child. And then I immediately pull it out and I'll take, maybe show them a couple micro fashion pics. And yeah, you'd be surprised. It's almost, they say yes more than if I was just asking for them. But a lot of times the parents are like, you can take a picture of them, not me. Them, not me. Yeah, so that's how I do it.
Oh. Yeah. See you there.
Do you ever rephrase or edit the interview? The thing that everyone on the blog is so articulate.
Yeah. Well, here's what it is. I wouldn't say it's. Well, first of all, the notes are shorthand. But, with that being said, I've given interviews with probably just about every newspaper there is at this point in my life, and maybe two of them actually recorded the conversation. It's standard journalistic practice, and everybody I've seen, you just take notes. You take notes. And are the words that in the New York Times article about me, and the Washington Post article about me, and every other article that's ever been written about me exactly my words? No. They're the shorthand of my words. So, what I do is I take notes to myself. I text it. And you say everyone is so articulate. And I wouldn't say that it's because of rephrasing. It's because of curation. It's where I will talk to somebody. Everyone's like, oh God, these people are so good. I'd freak out. I would never be able to say something that good. If you talk to me for 15 minutes, chances are we would touch on something you feel very comfortable about, or you feel very articulate about, and that's what it always is that I always know the caption as soon as I hear it. And I'm not transcribing a bunch of conversations and going back and trying to piece them together. I'm always just looking for that, that one thing that person says. And so, yeah, I guarantee you, I could everything. If I talked to every single one of you, for 15 or 20 minutes, there'd be something you said that the comments would be full of like, oh, I'd never be able to think of that. I'd never be able to think about that. The one hard stat I can give you is that I put up about 5,000 people in front of millions of people posts. I think I've had 3 people tell me I've misquoted them. So it's a pretty good track record. So I remember one time I said dad's boyfriend instead of mom's girlfriend. That was one of them. One girl gave me a tattoo explanation, okay, about why why she got a tattoo that said a certain thing. And then she said that wasn't, I think she just changed her mind about, once she started seeing the comments. That's what I've started to get. Like, people will say something and then they'll see, it's intimidating to be on Humans of New York these days. Like, it's intimidating. You read 5,000 people commenting on you. And so what happens is sometimes people will legitimately say something to me, and then they'll start reading all the comments and they'll want to sound a little bit different. Well, let's, instead of saying that, say this, and then I won't go back and change. If they want me to take it down, I will. But I'm not going to go back and touch them up based on their response to the comments. One of the examples was the Irish guy talking about crack. He said to me, he goes, "There's not real crack in America. If you want like a real Irish pub, you got to go to Ireland." And then he came back and he said, "Well, change it to, in most Irish pubs in America, there's not quite as much." But no, it's not what you said. So a lot of times I get, you can understand it, and it just gets more and more and more intimidating. I've completely lost control of the comment section. Basically, it's like you control it as much as you can by setting a positive culture, encouraging people to be supportive. But when you get up to like 4.5 and like 5 million Facebook fans, that's pretty much just the world. That's just like, that's everybody in the world's giving their opinion. And it's my biggest worry is that Humans in New York will get so intimidating to be on that, it'll become an unpleasant experience for people. And then, because I never want it to be that. So avoiding that, whether it be paying, 4 moderators all the time, but then how do you decide what's free speech and what's nasty? Where do you draw that line? That's a touchy subject, because after all, these are just people that I approached on a quiet street corner in a very quiet situation. They didn't sign up for it, they didn't volunteer for it, and then that night you got freaking Melvin from Kansas telling them that their ankles look fat. It's just, it's what I worry about the most, and I'll figure something out. Even if I have to pay 5 moderators to, you can tell what's nasty, and I don't know. Obviously, I think about it a lot. I want to keep it a positive experience.
Okay. Waving hand over there.
Yeah. Since you began interviewing, is there any one story that's really stuck with you?
No, not really. And I always say that though. It's just that like with Humans of New York, I honestly don't think that any 4 or 5 or 8 or 10 Humans of New York pictures are that impressive if just taken in isolation. It's just the scope. My friend said it's like a slow burn. He was like, honestly, he's the boyfriend of my girlfriend's friend. So like, it wasn't somebody I knew before Humans of New York. He's gonna be like, honest with you, like when I first saw your blog, I was like, what's this all about? Like, I don't understand why people like it so much. But then after following, he said it's like a slow burn. You just get so many different perspectives and so happiness, sadness, the whole range of emotions, whole range of socioeconomic philosophies. And it's just like, it's almost, and it loses kind of its power. Like I said, everybody who's involved in the business side is trying to get me to like monetize. Hey, let's make calendars and shit, da, 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 da. And I was just like, I don't even think a calendar would be that impressive. Like, how are you going to choose 12 people to represent humanity in New York? And so, yeah, it's just, I think it's all about the scope and the posts bouncing off each other that kind of make it really powerful. So, yeah, it is very difficult to choose one story as being the most impactful. Ellen's story would be the answer.
Sorry, over there.
Are there any groups of people who you have any more or less success with, specifically like New Yorkers versus tourists?
Yeah, absolutely. Tourists, European tourists are very difficult because, I mean, it's just like the first page of their guidebook is don't talk to anyone, you know? It's like, yeah, it's because everybody assumes that I'm like coming around and asking for money, especially like tourists. Like tourists, New York's got a reputation, and like a lot of them are walking around like, the way my friend said it, which I think is great, it's like, they're all waiting for the moment that New York's ugly face presents itself. And so they think it's going to be that nice guy, you know, kind of coming up, like trying to con them somehow. So you can kind of see it, like the moment you walk up, it's like, hi, you know, I run up, and it's normally the man, you know? It's, so that's difficult. I won't make specifics. Certain ethnicities are very insular. They have their very close-knit communities. They don't really want to let the outside world in. You know what I mean? When I can say, you know, the Hasidic Jews in New York, there's two big pockets of Hasidic Jews. It's interesting. They're very different. There's the Chabad, I know I'm saying this wrong, and there's the Sephardic. And one of them invites me into their holidays, their temples, and you know, everything. You know, the other ones, you know, photography is a sin. You know what I mean? And so it's like, obviously they're very hard. And along the spectrum of that, it's very difficult for me to get photographs in Chinatown. They have tourists trying to photograph them as spectacles all the time. And it's very hard for them to differentiate. And so it's trained into them, no, I don't care, no, you know? So, you know, a lot of times, you know, people will say, like, one of the things, hey, Brandon, you don't photograph these people as much, or these people as much, or these people as much, or these people as much. What are you, racist or whatever? And I like, you know, I wish people would kind of take a step back and say, you know, maybe it's not that he's not asking all people equally. It's maybe that different levels of people, whether it even be people with brown hair, blue eyes, just the whole range. Certain people, for certain reasons, don't want to be documented. And those people naturally kind of show up on the blog less, unfortunately. Because, you know, it is nice to show as diverse of a group as possible. Yeah.
Hey. I run a blog here in Dublin similar to yours, which was inspired by you. And I was just wondering, what's your opinion on copycat blogs around the world?
It's evolved. At first I was scared, honestly. Because like there was a long time where I hadn't made a penny off Humans of New York, a penny. And I was, you know, sleeping on a mattress on the floor in like a sublease situation, broke, kind of chasing my dream, and then these other human sites kind of started popping up, and I kind of, you know, my first response was like, oh no, you know, like, because Humans of New York is a concept, but it's also like a brand for my work, and I was like, oh no, you know, like, this is going to make it harder for me to ever get a book. So that was my first response. That was like my knee-jerk response. I've completely evolved away from that to where I embraced it completely, because I've just learned that, and here's another truism that I always say, is that the internet is designed to get your idea out there. The internet's designed to distribute, and it's not designed to monetize. The more you try to draw fences around your work and say, this is mine, the more you're fighting against what the internet is naturally created to empower you to do, which is spread. Like, for example, I don't know if your site's called Humans of Ireland or Humans of Dublin, but say it was. You know, and say you have 2,000 people following you, and only 15 of those even come to learn about Humans of New York through you. Those are still 15 fans I would have never had if it wasn't for you doing the idea in Ireland. You know? And I've kind of, and that's what I've come to realize. It's just that, you know, and I always preach it, it's that the opposite of this, the opposite of not caring if other people take your idea and use it in other parts of the world, is being a photographer trying to build an audience on the internet, having 5 images up there with your watermark all the way across the top. That's the kind of opposite of that, which is just like mine, 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 mine. And the more I've let go of that and not getting mad if people take even my photos, not just the idea, take my photos, and even if somebody steals my photos and puts them on their own website, in the comments section, people are saying that's Hey Humans of New York, and some people are seeing that and say, what's Humans of New York? You know what I mean? So, I've just gotten to the point where I am all for it. And I think it's not only, and I think you've probably realized that, one of the greatest parts about doing this kind of work is its effect on us. Just the effect of approaching people. I'm so comfortable with people now because of Humans of New York. It's just like, even when I don't have a camera, it's just nothing to approach somebody. And that's all through the work. There's nothing in my life that happens that I can't think back to a Humans of New York interview I've done where the person was going through the exact same thing. And so this is like such a wonderful thing. Why not let other people do it? So yeah, even though I kind of started with a kind of Scroogeous, I've completely evolved away from that. And yeah, I encourage and like all the offshoots. Yeah.
Maybe behind me.
Hi. Sorry, awkward angle. You mentioned that people sometimes get in touch and say that they find it intimidating or ask you to take things down and receive comments and stuff like that. Do you ever find that people get back in touch, particularly after they've shared a very personal or, I suppose, often sad story, and say that it really helped them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people get in touch in the comments section. An example of somebody who asked me to take one down, I'm not sure how closely you guys follow the blog. There was the cutest little girl in the world with a hijab. I did Today in Microfashion. She had this bright orange hijab, and she was, kind of spreading out. And then 98% of the comments were so positive, like, she's the greatest person in the world, she's so cute, like, oh, it was so great. And then you got 2 blowhards or 3 blowhards that are like, take that off her, she's a child, like, blah, 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 blah. And then the mom emailed me, and she's like, I'm gonna sue, because the dad gave me permission, then I'm sure he I'm sure the one person in that situation that heard more than me was the dad. So I took it down, but I did it, it was really sad for me to take it down because that almost made it look like there was a reason that it wasn't okay. When you got like 98% of people celebrating it, and then, I just wanted to respect her wishes. But, that was an example of one that I got taken down. But, as far as people that, are very having a good impact of it, if you'll notice if somebody says something about cancer or something about something that's really, personal to them, what are the first 10 or 15 comments that get upvoted to the top? People with very similar stories. The same thing happened to me, the same thing happened to me, the same thing happened to me, don't worry, this is how you handle it. And that is very therapeutic to people. And, often in the comment section even, you can see people kind of come in there and say, thank you guys so much. This has meant a lot to me. So yeah, it's that used to happen all the time. Now it's gotten to be a little bit more mixed with how huge it's gotten. Because I think the 4.5 million people who follow Honey are genuinely good people. I think if you're a dick, you get kind of bored with Honey, Seriously, it's like, oh, we haven't made fun, there's 20 people on here, we haven't called anybody fat, like what, whoa, and they just kind of get bored and move on. So I think the 4.5 million people who choose to like it are nice, but what happens in the nature of social media is that once things start to get shared and go viral, it goes out of the gates, you know what I mean? It just goes into the wild, and then you start kind of getting really mean things. So yeah, like I said, it's just the main worry for me now is just kind of maintaining that culture of positivity as Honey just gets gigantic.
Okay, we'll take 2 or 3 more questions. So from the back there. Yeah.
So what are your plans for when you're in Dublin or in Europe?
Somebody invited me back to their dorm room at the last one I gave. Tomorrow is my free day. I have a lot of projects going on in New York right now, so I couldn't stay for as long. I was saying, I almost don't want, I'm only here for a couple days, and I didn't want to do Humans of Dublin, because I almost think it's like an insult to only go place for 2 days and just take a few pictures of people and leave. So I would like to come back for like a week and, give it the full treatment. But yeah, tomorrow, I don't have plans tomorrow. I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I'm staying at the DoubleTree. If you want to pull up in the car. That's not what I meant. If in the morning you want to show up in the lobby, I'll probably be down there drinking coffee.
Okay, 2 more then.
Yeah.
In general, the mood in Honey is fantastic. People are usually very positive, and the most positive comments get the most likes.
Yeah.
It keeps itself positive.
Right.
But have you ever really had to intervene because people were really nasty?
My assistant calls it the ban hammer. Yeah, I got one assistant that does the banning. And it gets done a lot. I need more people to do it. I think it's just there's 5,000 or 6,000 comments on a lot of these. So yeah, no, we do banning. And yeah, one thing. This is just something small, but if you go on a laptop and look at Honey on Facebook, the comments are situated in relevance to how many people have upvoted them. I'm just begging Facebook to do the same thing on mobile, because everybody on mobile sees all the trash. Because if you log on mobile, all you see is the latest. And a lot of times that's just garbage, And so what people start, like, one thing that I hate is that, like, a lot of times the upvoted comment, the one sitting at the very top is, "How dare you call this person the ugliest person you've ever seen in your entire life? You are the nastiest person in the world. You should go die." And it's just like, it's like you took this insult that nobody would have normally seen, and in your righteous defense of it have given it power now. And that happens a lot. If you'll notice the top comment, it's like somebody repeating the insult and then negating it. So that's another thing. So yeah, a simple way I really do, like, even at high levels, I've just said to Facebook, please put the tiered commenting in mobile. Just that alone would clean up my comment section so much. Yet to happen though.
Okay, so maybe one final question. So. Yep.
If I was to approach you right now and ask you for your piece of information or info, what would you like to do?
Oh, what would I like you to ask me? Do you have a specific question?
What would you like to say? What do you want to be on Facebook?
What's funny? The only time, because I like I think the power, one of the power of Honey 2 is me staying in the background. You know what I mean? Because how much, the temptation of social media is to brag. Just a natural temptation is all your friends and all your families are following you, and the temptation is to show people the best parts of your life. As your audience grows, that temptation grows even more. Oh, I can show all kinds of people how cool I am, or so how great I am. But in reality, I think the power of Honey is kind of showing people's weakness, other people, highlighting other people. So I very, very, very astutely try to stay off the blog as much as possible. The example I like to give is that I had a book just fell off the bestseller list a couple weeks ago. Honey was on the New York Times bestseller list for 21 consecutive weeks. And in the past 4 months, I promoted it once. That's how uncomfortable I am putting myself on the blog. The only time I've ever like put a picture of myself on the blog since it's had more than like 5,000 fans was the time a pigeon shit on my face. Yeah. You guys remember that? It's just like, yeah, it's like, so I almost, it's the opposite of a bragging picture. I'll just, to give you a little bit of meat, a lot of times people turn my own questions on me. I'll answer to two. Greatest struggle, and I mean, this is such a bad struggle. I mean, I can't, my struggles are very largely behind me, knock on wood so far. Like, it was tough when I was getting started, and, I was very lonely and very poor for a very long time before Honey kind of took off. And, now it's turned into a fantastic struggle, which is compartmentalizing Honey. Having Honey have a place in my life and not completely taking over my life. Not be sitting there with my girlfriend eating dinner and just thinking about Honey all the time. You know what I mean? Just kind of having that place for it. And then the piece of advice that I give is don't wait for perfect. Because I feel like people are so scared to move on an idea until it's perfect. You have so many people sitting around discussing, waiting till they have that bulletproof idea that can't help but fail. And I always say that the Humans of New York that is wildly successful now looks absolutely nothing like the Humans of New York I chose to devote my life to. Absolutely nothing. And it wasn't the result of a fully formed idea that I had and I executed. It was the result of hard work and hundreds of tiny evolutions. And if I had waited to have this idea that would ultimately lead to me being successful, I would have never started. And so it's just like, if you have even an inkling of what you want to do, start working towards it. Because another way of saying that is it's impossible to gather information in a vacuum. It's impossible to form a successful idea without first working on it and finding out what's working and what's not. So if you even have an inkling of what you want to do, to start moving towards it, start working every day on it, setting aside an hour every day to work towards it. And if you don't know, and this is kind of boring, but this is what I did, if you don't know what you want to do, read biographies. Pick somebody that you admire, and then there's no greater education. And they're kind of unheralded, There's not a biography class in school, but there is no better education than to pick somebody you really admire and read 800 pages about the decisions they made in their life. There's nothing that you can apply closer to your life. So, I mean, if you have no idea what you want to do, start there. Pick people you admire and just read how they formed their lives. And you can't help but solidify more about what you want to do. Yeah.
Okay, so I think the final thing, and most important thing for us to do, is to confer on Mr. Stanton James Joyce Award for his incredible contribution. I think we can all agree to both photography and storytelling. Thank you very much.